Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Eddie Marcus here again. Can you believe that this is the fourth time this morning that I have produced videos to give you some message? It is. And for this message, I call it, I put the failure of this world, but more specifically, I put the failure of this nation directly on the shoulders of the church. Directly on the shoulders of the church. It is its failure that is allowing the United States of America to go straight down this rabbit hole, that has allowed that selection of Donald Trump as president of the United States. Now, why do I say that? All of the churches tell you that the population is led by that old garden snake that got Adam and his family kicked out of the garden. Now, I don't know whether you believe that story or not, but the message is true in every society. The message is true in every society. Now, what that basically means is this, is that all the people on earth are void of the truth of God. Certain things they can probably perceive. You know, the establishment of the earth, they know they had nothing to do with that. And all that the earth is about, they had nothing to do with that. The creation of human beings, they had nothing to do with that. But from there on, they think they got one hand in it. And they do, for one reason or another. But basically, upon their concept, it's the strong that runs the show, the smart that runs the show, and even those that try to connect themselves with the divine, that same power that most people don't know anything about, but the leaders try to connect themselves to it, is that. And the only thing that would separate or change these people's mind is someone who is connected with God, someone who has revelation from God, a truth that the people can be exposed to. Not just words, but deeds. Now, what do we have here in America? We got churches from every denomination, whether it's Catholic, Protestant, or any of the others, all talking about love, talking about justice, talking about God. But what does that mean to the average Joe Blow? What does that mean to the average Joe Blow? He's living in a world where his dreams or her dreams are not being met. And so what do they want to hear about a God, especially a God that's saying that there's a promised land somewhere in another world, someplace when you go, when they are recognizing that in every nation there are people who seem to be riding that high tide, whose dreams are basically being met every day. And it's due to the usurpation of that benefit that is due to those who have been put low and low on that totem pole. Some of them have nothing. So you have crimes and violences. We have prostitution. You put that down, but you don't want to put down what caused it. You have drug abuse and the selling of drugs. You put that down, but you don't want to deal with what causes it. I had a dope dealer once while I was out there smoking weed and was still preaching, who said, "Brother Marcus, I understand what you're saying, but God ain't paying no bills. I got to get my bills paid." I understand that. I understood it then. But like the cowards that go up in that pulpit every Sunday and tell you stories, I was a coward because I know you've been programmed to think against the church. You're programmed to think against the church because the church is nothing but a bunch of hot air. Let me tell you, I got brothers that are preachers. I got in-laws that are preachers. I got friends, so-called friends, that are preachers. Good people. But they wouldn't tell you the truth of God for nothing. Probably because they don't know it. They don't know the truth. You see, people who have been touched and called by God, who have been inspired by God, has been given a vision. And you heard the word say that whom God has called and chosen, he has prepared to take care of his business. And most of those who have been called and chosen and educated about the business of God by the Spirit of God, not by some institution, not by some college or university, but by the Spirit of God, who have walked according to the dictates of that training, have been murdered. Now, I'm sure there's some somewhere around still doing the business, and they haven't gotten popular enough yet. In other words, their message has not been received by enough people to cause any rattling of the boat against the system. And so they're still hanging around. As soon as that changes, they will be murdered. So what am I talking to you about, ladies and gentlemen? I'm talking to you about men and women who have heard the message of God and decided, they made a choice, a individual choice to get on that bandwagon of talking about serving God. Some of them were motivated because they saw an opportunity to make a living. Some of them saw an opportunity to make a great living. Some of them saw an opportunity to say that they had changed, and so they are doing God's work. But the evidence of their not being connected with God is what we see around us every day. If you think I'm lying, go to church this Sunday. Any church. And they're going to be talking to you about stories. They're going to be talking to you about traditions. You can hear every story from the Genesis to Moses to everything, nothing but stories. But what does it mean? What does it translate in regards to the everyday life? Well, as far as they're concerned, they don't have to do any more than that. Because if they can tell the story quite well, then the people are going to be moved. Their emotions will be touched. They'll come out saying that they got a good message today. But what kind of change will it bring in their lives? How often have you said they want to thank God for waking them up this morning, for enabling them to stand up on their own feet, to even go to a job? How often have you saw them giving God credit like this? But how many, I ask you, how many do you believe that God can look down and say, my good and faithful servant, well done? You think God is saying that because you went to church? You think God would say that because you in the choir? Because you're a deacon? Because you were committed to that? Do you think God would say, my faithful servant, well done? Well done for what? What? There's the command that says, or at least a prayer, that thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What have you done today to bring us closer to that? I ask all of the churches. I'm not asking you the people. You got an excuse. You don't know God. And when to know God means God has given you a miracle. Something that has happened to you that no others have ever experienced. Something that proves to you beyond a shadow of doubt that there is no question about God. And with that authority, with that revelation, it enables you to stand up against the wells of the world and say, God is. You know that God is. And talking about it is not good enough. You got to walk the walk, brother. If you don't walk the walk, your talk don't mean a darn thing. So I'm saying to you, the responsibility of the failure of this nation is on the hands of those of you who profess to know God, calling yourself a church. It is very simple. You know the word says that thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, body, soul, and mind. That means that God is supreme. Supreme against every institution. Supreme against the founding fathers. Supreme against the Constitution of the United States. Supreme against any rules and regulations that have been set forth by mankind. God is. And what is that second commandment? That second commandment is that you should love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hangs all the law and all the prophets. And then it doesn't stop there. It even says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And all the things that you desire, all the things that you need, all the things that you want will be added unto your life. Not as an individual, but as a nation of people who have received the message of God. Now, what does that mean? That means I don't just tell you that. If I say this to you, to a people who don't know anything about God, it's just words. But I must be able to advocate and step in and stand against any institution, anything that's designed to prevent this from happening to you. I must stand against it and put my life on the line that you, the people, can understand that there's a difference between God and God's will for you and the government. And if I can't do that for you, you have no right to listen to me. You have no right to believe anything that I say. And as I say that, you got no right to believe anything that the church is telling you. I tell you today, had God not shown the miracles to me and brought them in my life and revealed himself in such a way that I can boldly sit here and say these things to you, there is no way I would go to a church unless I was trying to seek out some pretty honey to talk to, as most men do. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, I put the failure of this nation, I put the failure of this nation's ability to choose a man to represent it as president of the United States fully in the hands of those who've been misrepresenting God. And I challenge all of you preachers to shut up and stop trying to rip the people off. I remember years and years ago, my mother told me, she says, Eddie B., you know God real well. I don't hear people talking about God like you do. You should build you a church. Get you a church. And it'll be running over with people. She probably suggested that I'd have a mega church. But my words to her was, God did not create me. God did not give me this message. God did not prepare me to have a church. There are those who heard that I talked about God a lot and just assumed that I had a church, assumed that I was prosperous because I was in the church. And that's what happens to those churches that strive out to be that way, only to find out that I'm not connected with a church. I'm an independent child of God, free from all of the things that would bind us to be a hellish type of people. And I speak this way to you because you got to accept some kind of freedom from a person or people. And I would say a church, even though I don't know any that I can point to today and refer you to. So I would basically say, not even listen to me, but get on your knees and pray and ask God to show you a revelation, show you something. Open up your heart. Get your heart pure enough to receive, to tune in, because the message of God is not just directed to individuals. It's out there for all of the pure in heart. They shall see God. And as you see God, start taking the steps that represent God, so that this nation can know that there's a difference between the government, whether it's Republican or Democrat, whether it's socialistic, communistic, or democracy. Let them know by your actions that God is real. And if you can't do that, sit your butt down and stop misleading these people in the name of God. Your big churches, your bankrolls, your fine jets, all of these things got people thinking that you know God. You don't know anything about God. And I tell you, and I challenge you, and I say to you, that the failure of this nation, I place strictly and totally on the shoulders of the church. And I want to thank you for those of you who've listened. But I don't want you to just listen. I want you to open up your hearts. And I want you to pray to God to give you a revolution, to give you a revelation that will change you and cause you to do what those before you have failed to do. And do it in the name of God. Thank you.